Let me help you to get your green screen videos from this pretty bad result to this one. In these short and easy to understand lessons, I will help you to find the right green screen background for your room size, use case and budget, find the perfect green screen lighting, show you how to set both up to get the best result, because just having the best tools doesn't automatically mean you use them correctly. And at the end I will teach you the best practice to remove the green color from your videos and photos to replace the background. I don't want to waste your time, so let's dive right into it and start with the background for your green screen. As you can see, there are various options out there. I will discuss 4 of them, and after explaining the advantages and disadvantages of each option, I will give you a real-world comparison so that you can make an educated decision which one to get according to the room size you have available and, just as important, for your budget. Let's start with the most popular one, simply because of its price. Green screen cloth or fabric. They start at around $12 on Amazon. Most important is that it is not reflective. We all know that silk-like fabric is very reflective, and that has 2 downsides. First, it will reflect more of the green color onto your subject, which will create a color cast on skin tones, etc. We will get to that later. And second, it will create unevenly lit areas of the cloth. Some will be brighter due to the reflections, and some darker. Talking about unevenly lit backgrounds, that is a big downside of most fabrics in general. They are usually stored folded, and that obviously creates lots of wrinkles. And wrinkles again create an uneven background. Why is that a problem? In the end, you will key out a range of green tones. The smaller that range of tones is that you have to key out, the easier it is and the better and cleaner the final results will be, without eating away parts of your subject like hair. So for green screen work, you want the most even background possible. Obviously, the cloth is not very even because of the wrinkles, but the good news is you can get rid of most of these. First and foremost, by stretching the fabric. For this, you need quite a few clamps and a solid background stand. That of course adds to the price of this solution. I'd recommend at least 8 to 10 clamps for good results. Some already come with 4 clamps, but that's not enough. On a side note, I will set up a link with a buying guide of all the tools I used and recommend in the comments, so that you don't have to individually search for them. But back to the cloth. Depending on the fabric, that could still leave some wrinkles. What options do we have to further reduce them? You could use a steamer, or you can spray the fabric with water. In my experience with the cheap cloth from Amazon, that helps a bit, but doesn't get rid of all the wrinkles. Plus, it takes a bit for the background to dry, particularly with the sprayed water. All this setting up, stretching, steaming, spraying makes this option the slowest and most cumbersome setup for every shoot. So that is definitely a con. And talking about cons, here is a list of pros and cons for the green screen cloth. First, it is easily available. Second, you get many different sizes and you can obviously cut it to the exact size you need. That may be very small if you only need it for headshots, but it may also be very large to present the weather. Third, it can extend to the floor and create a cheap side wall in case you need full body shots. But that immediately creates wrinkles that are much more difficult to stretch out, and moving around on the fabric makes it even worse. So that's not as usable as you may think it is if you want good quality full body shots. Fourth, and often underestimated pro, is that cloth improves the sound quality. When you film in a room with lots of flat hard surfaces like blank walls, tables, floors without carpets, etc., the sound bounces around in the room and creates a lot of reverb. Fabric has a much more uneven surface and will absorb a lot of that reverb. If you shoot video very often, you would consider other options to improve the sound quality in your room, like I did here on my ceiling. So while this is an advantage of fabric, it is not something I'd base my green screen purchase decision on. Fifth advantage, it is mobile, so you can bring it everywhere you want. Now to the cons. First, you may think it is dirt cheap. Yes, it is, if you buy the cloth only. As I said, it starts at around $12 on Amazon. But if you add the stand, the clamps, and maybe even a steamer, it adds up, so it may not be as cheap as you think. Second, it takes a while to set up, as I said. If you're lazy like I am, it's not the best option for setting up and tearing down on a regular basis. Third, if you have a very confined space, keep in mind that the stand takes up quite a bit of space, to the sides and to the back. An alternative to the stand is to get eyelet patches and sew them onto the fabric, or tar clips. That way you can mount some hooks on the wall and stretch the fabric accordingly. That would be very space saving. And the fourth downside of cheap green screen cloth is if you don't get rid of all the wrinkles, your green screen will be very uneven. And that makes keying in software a nightmare. So much for regular cloth. The next option is this one here from Westcott that I bought several years ago, and it is still available. It is called X-Drop Backdrop, and I particularly like the cloth. It's the same material like a very thin fleece jacket, which means it is very matty, very elastic and lightweight. Just as lightweight as the stand. The whole system is super easy to set up and available in different dimensions. There is an X-Drop system and the X-Drop Pro, which is bigger. You can also get different backdrops for the system, from black and white to Christmas, and some even extend to the floor. The one I bought is the smaller kit, and it comes at a price at roughly $120. That's actually pretty affordable, and I really like the whole kit. So the system is really great. But, and here comes the big downside, it takes up a lot of space. This back support here gives the whole system a depth of around 60 inch or 150 centimeter to even set it up. Much more than the cloth with a stand we had before. But when there is shadow, there also is light. The cool thing is that you can get the cloth extra and it has eye lights included. In the past I have mounted the cloth only on the wall of my office by just screwing some hooks into the wall that you can cover by pictures when you don't use the green screen. That is a really great option that is super quick to set up, and the material is pretty amazing. That would make the wall-mounted Westcott cloth my favorite green screen background for an office environment. I will give you a link to the cloth in the description. So that was option 2 for green screen backgrounds. The third option is a background paper roll. This is my favorite green screen background for full-length portraits or scenes that require to show the complete body. Because obviously you can easily extend it to the floor, so they form a pretty good cyc wall. And if paper rolls get dirty, you just cut the dirty part away. They also come in different sizes between 135 centimeters and 272 centimeters, with also different lengths. You can mount them on the same background stand that I mounted the cloth on, or, which I prefer, you can wall mount them. There are single hooks or multiple hooks for wall mounting in case you want to use different colors of paper or want to store them. If you wall mount them, I suggest getting a drive set that will let you easily roll and unroll the background. Trust me, you want that to avoid cumbersome unrolling. Another option to mount background paper rolls in case you don't want to drill holes into your wall are so-called auto poles. They are perfect for tight spaces and mount between the ceiling and the wall. Then you can get these kind of hooks and a super clamp to mount the roll onto the auto poles. Obviously, paper is much more uniform than cloth can ever be and creates a very even, unwrinkled background. But now to the downsides of the paper. It is not as even as you may think, because on the edge it tends to coil or bend, if you will. That creates a dark edge and therefore a less even key than you would expect. Of course, if you crop away the edge or don't need the full width of the paper, that is not an issue. But I want to be precise, so I need to mention that. The second downside is that in regard to audio, the cloth absorbs much more reverb than paper, because paper is much more plain, so paper reflects the sound more than cloth does. So much for paper. The next option is the one that I personally use most. Paint. I have painted the wall in this basement studio with a specific green screen paint. Why do I prefer that? Because once it is painted, I have absolutely no setup time. The size of the green background is as big as can be for the room size that you have available. The surface and color are probably as even as can be. And I don't lose any space at all because there are no stands that I have to set up. Particularly in small rooms, that is a big bonus. So I can move around as much as possible without fearing to move out of the frame or intersect with the edge of my green screen background. But that, of course, also comes with a downside. If you do that in your office, you have to like the color. I personally love green and I feel it actually looks pretty nice. And it's also in my dedicated basement studio, so I have no issues with it. The second downside is light spill. If you paint your studio wall green, you need to cover it when you use it for other stuff, for example when shooting on white background. Otherwise it could create a color cast on your subjects, particularly for wider shots. And the third downside is sound. Cloth absorbs sound, walls reflect sound, and the bigger the plain wall is, the more it will reflect. As I already mentioned, to greatly improve the sound, I have covered the ceiling of my studio area. You could also use carpets to improve the reverb, but that would create a lot of dust. In general, anything that breaks or disturbs the reflection of the sound waves will improve the audio quality big time. Let me know in the comments if you need more info in this regard. So, let's do a real-world comparison of our 4 background options. I have set up this rather basic lighting, and for every single one of the options I'm going to move the lights so that they have the same distance to the background. And now I will make a fool out of myself by wearing this wig, because who am I kidding? A bald man is pretty easy to key out. And then I will do the same performance for every green screen background. Boy, how can people live with that? That's ridiculous. Let's compare the samples. To better show you the results, I will slightly shrink the video and place them over a light blue background. That way you can see how well the key works up into the corners. A key that looks good like this one may actually not be all that great when you examine the edges that way. But back to the samples. The first one is the cheap unstretched cloth. As you can see, when I apply a default green screen key, the wrinkles are still visible. To remove them, I have to change some of the software settings that I will discuss later, but have a look at how that change eats away the dark hair. Here's a before and the after. Let me zoom in a bit to see it even better. Before and after. So having to compensate a bad background in your editing software creates, among other things, super ugly hair, which is definitely not what you want. So let's have a look if stretching the cloth improves the result. I would say that's a lot better. Let's compare the stretched result to the unstretched result. Again with default software settings. Big improvement if you ask me. And now let's check the other results. To save you some time, I have aligned them all at once on the screen. First, you logically see that both the X-drop and the cheap cloth are not very wide, but you can get both solutions bigger, so that doesn't really speak against them. Then you can see that the X-drop gives a much better key compared to even the stretched cheap cloth. The background paper is about as good as the X-drop, just wider, but the painted background is still a bit better due to the 100% flat surface of the wall compared to the coiled edges of the paper. So the ranking goes, winner is the painted background. Shared second, if you get the wider X-drop, is the X-drop Pro and paper. And last is the cheap cloth. Now you probably wonder how we can improve our results even further. Let me tell you that even the best background is nothing without the right light. Let me show you how to best light your green screen in various room sizes from extremely small to about the size I have here in the next video.